Hey guys, it's Miss Johnson, and I'm here to talk you through how we decide how to set up our probabilities. I'm looking at Unit 7, Practice 8, where we take all of the probabilities that we've learned and we kind of mix them together, and you guys are forced to make a decision on how do I set up each of these probabilities? When do I multiply? When do I add? When do I have to use a permutation or combination? So up at the top of that practice page, I'm just going to kind of fill in those boxes up there and help us make some of those decisions. We first talked about probability of independent and dependent events. That's when we wanted more than one thing to happen at the same time. So we would say, what's the probability of this and that? Or what's the probability of you both getting such and such candy or a pepperoni piece of pizza, things like that. When we had independent and dependent events, we wanted to multiply probabilities. So we need to set up a probability for each. For each person or each thing or each event, and then multiply tops and bottoms. The numerators and denominators. Okay, so multiply the numerators and the denominators. When we multiply fractions, we go straight across the top, straight across the bottom. You can simplify the fraction, or you can reduce it and leave it as a decimal, round to that third decimal place, and go from there. The key words that tell us that this is what we are going to do are things like, or key phrases, I should say, this and that. Probability of you getting a red queen and a 2, whatever. The two things there are that you are trying to find, or more than 2, sometimes more than 2. So this and that, or probability of both, getting pepperoni, or whatever the phrase may be. Sometimes you see the word and, sometimes you see the word both. Those two things are telling you that you want those things to happen at the same time. Want them both to happen. So you want all those things to happen. Now, when we flip over to mutually exclusive and inclusive events, now we are talking about events or probabilities that we add together. Okay, so adding probabilities. So we're going to set up a probability for each again. This is the one where we have to determine if there's any crossover that we have to take away. So we would subtract any crossover. And just a reminder, when we add and subtract fractions, we are only adding the tops. Only add the numerator. And that's just a fraction review. Leave the denominator the same. Denominator stays the same. Okay, so the key word that you're going to see for this is or. Now you want the probability of this or that. Anytime you see the word or, that tells you that you're adding your probabilities. That tells you that you're only looking for one thing, only picking one thing, only choosing one thing. One thing. It's just that you have multiple successes. Okay, so you have more than one success that you would be happy with. And then the last thing that we learned when we were talking about probability is probability with combinations and permutations. So when we are selecting several of the same item, we have to use a combination or permutation. So choosing more than one thing or choosing multiple of one thing, when we are choosing more than one, more than one item. So for example, it may say, the phrasing might look like this. What is the probability of picking 2 you know, whatever, sophomores. That's just an example that we looked at. So choosing more than one thing, choosing more than one item. And remember that combinations, the order does not matter. Combs, no order. That's supposed to be an M. No order. Permutations, order matters. Order matters. Okay, and then we want to set up that probability, we want to find the total that goes in the denominator, that total number of picking whatever number of items you have, and then you're going to have a so there's going to be permutations on the top of the fraction and permutations on the bottom of the fraction. You have to find those combinations or permutations first, and then do the division. So anytime you're picking more than one thing, that's where this is coming from. It might not be 2, it might be 3 or 4 or 5 or 8 or 10 or whatever, but the probability of picking 10 letters from the alphabet, or the probability of picking 3 Reese's out of the jar. Okay, so anytime you're picking more than one thing, you can use a combination or permutation to figure out that probability. So I hope that helps you pick out some of those keywords that you'll need when you're working on this practice assignment, and in turn when you're taking the quiz, which is coming up after the quiz review, which is right after this assignment. So thanks for listening.